What if I told you that a 180-year-old log cabin once survived a brutal -38 degrees Fahrenheit winter night and stayed warmer than most modern homes? It sounds impossible, but this actually happened in Wisconsin back in 1986. A small cabin built in 1847 sat alone in temperatures cold enough to crack steel and kill a car battery in minutes. Yet inside, the air remained comfortably warm at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, all from a tiny fire glowing in an old stone hearth. No foam insulation, no fiberglass, no furnace, no HVAC system. Not even double-pane windows, just hand-cut logs and craftsmanship from another era. Meanwhile, modern homes, stuffed with insulation, sealed in plastic wrap, powered by HVAC systems that cost more than a used car, can drop to freezing in a matter of hours when the power goes out. Pipes burst, walls sweat. Families pile under blankets, shivering in the same homes that are supposed to be energy efficient. The moment the electricity stops, the house becomes a refrigerator. And that gives us a question we can't ignore. How did people with axes and hand tools build homes that outperform our 21st century houses by such a staggering margin? What knowledge did they use that we have completely abandoned? The answer isn't just thick logs. It isn't magic, and it isn't nostalgia. It's physics, applied with ruthless efficiency. Medieval and early frontier builders created what modern construction barely understands. A complete thermal system built around dense timber that stores heat like a battery, airtight joinery that blocks wind better than most new houses, and a heating strategy engineered for survival rather than convenience. Modern homes, on the other hand, rely entirely on continuous energy input. Heating isn't part of the design, it is the design. So when the power stops, everything collapses. You can feel this every winter. The furnace kicking on every few minutes, the cold draft near the windows, the subtle sense that the house is constantly losing a battle you keep paying to fight. Because modern walls don't hold heat, they only delay the loss of heat. Like wearing a thin windbreaker in a snowstorm. The moment you stop moving, you freeze. But a medieval log cabin? That's a thick wool coat already warmed by a fire, radiating heat long after the flames have died. And that difference changes everything. The secret behind this impossible warmth begins in the forest, with the trees those old builders chose, how they shaped them, and the brilliant thermal logic they built into every wall. To understand why those homes stay warm when modern houses fail, we have to start where they started, deep in the woods. To understand how a medieval log cabin could hold warmth through nights that would cripple a modern house, we have to go back to the very first decision those old builders made: choosing the right tree. They didn't cut down whatever was convenient. They walked deep into ancient forests of pine and spruce, searching for slow-grown, old-growth trees that had endured harsh winters for a century or more. These trees grew tight, dense, and unbelievably strong, some with over 100 growth rings packed into a single inch. Modern plantation lumber, rushed through growth cycles and harvested young, often has barely 10 to 20 rings per inch. The difference is staggering. Dense wood carries more mass, and more mass means more thermal capacity, the ability to absorb heat during the day and release it slowly through the night like a natural battery. A single 12-inch log from an old-growth pine can weigh nearly twice as much as a modern equivalent, and that weight isn't just strength. It's stored warmth. But selecting the right wood was only the beginning. The real magic was in how those logs were shaped, fitted, and locked together. Medieval builders used a technique called scribe-fit joinery, a painstaking process where each log was individually carved to match the exact contours of the log beneath it. This wasn't simple stacking. It was sculpting. A single wall could take weeks to assemble, but when it was done, the logs interlocked so tightly that even modern energy-rated homes struggled to match the airtightness. And here's the genius part. As the logs dried over the first few years, they shrank naturally. The builders carved the joints so that the weight of the structure pressed the logs tighter and tighter together over time, creating a self-sealing system that actually improved with age. Between those logs, they packed a brilliant natural blend: sphagnum moss for insulation and elasticity, clay to lock out air, and animal hair to bind everything together like rebar in concrete. Sphagnum moss is a wonder material: springy, breathable, rot-resistant, acidic enough to repel insects, and filled with tiny air pockets that hold heat almost as well as modern fiberglass. Clay adds the airtight layer, while the fibers keep the mix stable for decades, even centuries. Together, they formed a living seal that flexed with seasons, shifted with humidity, and still kept out the cold with brutal effectiveness. And then comes the part modern homes simply cannot compete with: thermal lag. These cabins used massive logs, 10, 12, sometimes 16 inches thick, creating walls so dense that it could take 12 to 24 hours for the cold outside to work its way inward. By the time that cold finally reached the interior surface, the homeowners had already lit the next fire. It turned the entire house into a thermal flywheel, a system that never allowed cold to catch up. All of this, the trees they chose, the density of the wood, the airtight carving, the living insulation, created walls that didn't just resist the cold. They fought back. They worked with the fire, with the climate, with the physics of heat itself. And that's why these cabins stayed warm during blizzards that would shut down modern neighborhoods. The warmth wasn't an accident. It was engineered into every surface of the home. But even the best walls are only half the story. The true heart of a medieval cabin, the engine that made everything work, was the heating system. And it's something modern homes abandoned long ago. Walls alone didn't make these cabins warm. What truly transformed them into winter fortresses was the heating system at their core, a system almost no modern home uses anymore. And to understand why these ancient structures could stay warm for 24 hours with a single fire, we need to look at a piece of technology far more advanced than it looks: the masonry heater. Unlike a modern fireplace, which sends most of its heat straight up the chimney, a masonry heater is essentially a giant thermal battery built from stone, brick, or tile. In Russia, it's called a pechka. In Scandinavia, a kakelun. In Germany, a Kachelofen. Different names, same brilliant idea. Instead of burning huge logs all day, you build one fast, extremely hot fire. The flames roar for 15 to 30 minutes, and the heater channels that heat through a labyrinth of internal passageways, carved deep inside tons of masonry. As the hot gases snake through these channels, almost all of their heat is absorbed into the stone. By the time the smoke escapes at the top, it's barely warm, because the bricks have taken everything they need. And once the fire dies, the magic begins. Those several thousand pounds of masonry slowly release stored heat for 12 to 24 hours, radiating a gentle, even warmth that fills the entire room, without drafts, without noise, without pumping hot air to the ceiling and leaving your feet cold. Radiant heat doesn't warm the air, it warms you, your furniture, your bed, every object in the room. It creates a comfort modern forced air systems can't come close to. Mark Twain once wrote about these stoves during his travels in Russia, amazed that a servant could burn a small basket of thin sticks for a few minutes each morning, close the stove door, and the room would stay warm well past midnight. A few minutes of fire for a full day of comfort. That's not old-fashioned, that's efficient engineering, and medieval builders knew exactly where to place this powerhouse. The masonry heater usually sat at the center of the home, sharing walls with multiple rooms so it could radiate heat in every direction. Bedrooms were often built as warm alcoves tucked against the heater's backside, so at night, people literally slept with their backs against warm stone. Some heaters had built-in baking ovens, heated benches, drying niches, and even smoke chambers in the attic for preserving meat. Every square inch served a purpose. When you combine this radiant heating with the thick log walls, the airtight joinery, the living insulation, and the naturally compact room design, the entire cabin becomes a tightly orchestrated thermal system. And it's a system modern homes don't replicate, not because it doesn't work, but because we stopped valuing the knowledge needed to build it. But a true medieval cabin was more than strong walls and a powerful heater. It was an entire ecosystem designed to trap, circulate, and preserve heat with almost zero wasted energy. To see how perfectly everything worked together, we need to look at the cabin as a whole, not just its parts. A medieval log cabin wasn't warm because of one clever trick. It wasn't the thick logs alone. It wasn't just the airtight joinery or the brilliant masonry heater. The real secret, the thing modern homes fail to understand, is that every part of the cabin worked as one unified thermal machine. Nothing was accidental, nothing was wasted. It started with the foundation. Instead of resting directly on frozen soil like many modern sheds and cabins do, traditional builders lifted the structure on stone piers. This simple elevation broke the thermal bridge with the ground, preventing the earth from sucking heat out of the floor. Above those stones sat thick wooden planks, sometimes doubled, sometimes packed with moss or sawdust beneath. Even the floor participated in the fight against the cold. Then came the walls, massive log cylinders that acted as both insulation and thermal storage. The scribe-fit joinery locked out wind better than some modern homes built to strict energy codes. The moss and clay mixture breathed just enough to release moisture, but not enough to leak heat. And because these materials were natural and flexible, they adjusted season after season. The house didn't fight the weather, it adapted to it. Inside, the rooms were intentionally compact. Low ceilings kept radiant heat close to human bodies rather than letting it rise out of reach. Doorways were narrow, corners were tight. The space wasn't designed for aesthetics or the modern obsession with open floor plans. It was designed to keep every square foot warm with the least amount of fuel. In a medieval cabin, warmth wasn't something you filled the air with. It was something you designed into the architecture. And then there was thermal zoning, perhaps the most overlooked part of the entire system. Medieval builders didn't try to heat every room to the same temperature. They didn't expect the storage room to feel like the kitchen or the bedroom to match the living area. Instead, they let warmth settle naturally where it mattered most. The main living space stayed around the mid-60s. Sleeping areas hovered closer to the mid-50s, perfectly comfortable under heavy blankets. Storage areas stayed cooler still, which actually preserved food and supplies. This wasn't a flaw, it was strategy. By allowing temperature gradients throughout the home, they dramatically reduced the total heating load. Compare that to modern homes, which try to force every corner of a house, including empty guest rooms, unused hallways, and attics people never enter, to maintain the same thermostat setting. That obsession with uniform comfort costs a fortune in energy and delivers far less actual warmth. Even the chimney played a role. Instead of venting straight up and out, the chimney often rose through upper lofts before exiting, warming secondary spaces along its path. Heat was never wasted if it could be used. Cooking areas were built beside the masonry heater, so the residual warmth dried clothes, warmed boots, preserved food, and often doubled as a daily living hub. And here's the part modern homeowners would envy most. These cabins required almost no maintenance. No motors, no filters, no electronics. A child could learn to operate the heater in a day. The structure itself improved over time, tightening as the wood seasoned and settling into its most efficient state. In fact, a 50-year-old cabin was often warmer and more stable than when it was newly built, the exact opposite of modern construction, which begins deteriorating the moment it's finished. A medieval cabin was, quite literally, a living thermal organism. Every wall, every floorboard, every nook and alcove worked together to produce a level of warmth modern homes only achieve with continuous energy. And this system didn't need technology. It didn't need upgrades. It simply needed builders who understood how to work with their materials instead of fighting against them. But if these old methods were so effective, why did we abandon them? Why did we trade resilience and efficiency for speed and convenience? The answer lies in modern history, and in the choices we made long before the first HVAC unit ever existed. If medieval cabins were so efficient, so resilient, and so brilliantly engineered for brutal winters, then a difficult question remains. Why did we walk away from all of it? Why did a system that worked flawlessly for centuries vanish almost overnight, replaced by buildings that collapse the moment the power goes out? The answer traces back to three powerful forces: industrialization, cheap energy, and the cost of skilled labor. When North America was being settled in the 1800s, there was no time to carve perfect scribe-fit joints or hunt for century-old trees with rock-hard density. Millions of people needed homes, fast. Sawmills expanded across the continent, and the idea of cutting uniform boards, light, straight, interchangeable, became irresistible. A house that once required craftsmen weeks to fit together could now be assembled in days. It wasn't better, it was just faster. Then came the age of cheap fossil fuels. Coal, and later oil and natural gas, could heat even the draftiest homes for just a few dollars. Suddenly, thermal efficiency became irrelevant. Why bother building a home that stores heat for 24 hours when you can burn coal endlessly for pennies? Energy abundance made good design unnecessary, and once the culture shifted, the knowledge faded. After World War II, the shift intensified. The country needed homes at a scale never seen before, and builders optimized for speed and cost above all else. We got thin walls filled with insulation but lacking mass, cheap windows that lost heat faster than they kept it, and designs meant to impress on the blueprint rather than perform in winter storm conditions. Most modern homeowners don't realize it, but the way we build today isn't optimized for comfort or long-term savings. It's optimized for the lowest possible sale price, because that's where the profit margin is. A house that looks flashy, goes up quick, and satisfies building codes is more valuable to a developer than a house that will cost half as much to heat for the next 50 years. Thermal mass doesn't fit that model. Skill doesn't fit that model. Longevity doesn't increase profits at closing time. Meanwhile, the knowledge behind these old systems quietly disappeared. Scribe-fit joinery isn't taught in trade schools. Masonry heater builders are rare. Some say only a handful of true masters remain across North America. The people who carried this craft were often rural, isolated, and disconnected from modern construction trends. As they passed away, so did the techniques. And so, without even realizing it, we traded resilience for convenience. We traded systems that improve with age for systems that degrade from the moment they're installed. We replaced dense, heat-holding materials with light, hollow ones. We replaced radiant warmth with forced air. And we accepted a design philosophy that assumes electricity will always be available, fuel will always be cheap, and winter will always be manageable. But winter never changed. Physics never changed. What changed was us. And this brings us to the uncomfortable truth modern homeowners rarely hear. A medieval log cabin, using nothing but natural materials and simple tools, can outperform many brand new homes built today. Not because it's old, but because it's engineered around the realities of cold climates. If we want to understand just how severe the difference is, we need to look at real-world tests. Direct comparisons between modern houses and traditional log cabins under extreme conditions. And when researchers finally ran those experiments, the results were shocking. The proof, as they say, is in the practice. When researchers finally put these ideas to the test, the results didn't just confirm the old builders were right, they exposed just how fragile modern construction really is. In 2004, a team from the University of Alaska built two small cabins in Fairbanks, side by side. One cabin was built using modern 2x6 framing, stuffed with R19 insulation, sealed in plastic, finished with drywall, and heated with a propane furnace. The other was built the old way, 10-inch scribed logs, moss chinking, and a masonry heater at its core. Through the heart of an Alaskan winter, where temperatures routinely fall to -40 degrees, the differences became impossible to ignore. The modern cabin needed its furnace running constantly just to stay around 70 degrees. The moment researchers shut off the propane to simulate a blackout, the indoor temperature began a steep, steady fall. In just 8 hours, it hit 40 degrees. Within a day, it nearly matched the outside temperature. In other words, a modern home in extreme cold becomes unlivable in less than 24 hours. The log cabin performed like it was playing by a different set of rules. Fired twice daily, using only about 35 pounds of wood total, it cycled comfortably between 62 degrees Fahrenheit before the morning burn and about 72 degrees Fahrenheit afterward. Then came the real shock. When the heater was left untouched for 3 full days, the interior never dropped below 48 degrees Fahrenheit. No furnace, no electricity, no backup system. Just thermal mass doing what thermal mass does, holding on to the warmth long after the fire is gone. Other studies around Scandinavia and Russia found the same thing. Historic log homes, some more than 200 years old, tested warmer, tighter, and more efficient than new houses built to modern energy codes. Thermal imaging on winter nights showed modern homes bleeding heat through windows and seams, while log homes glowed evenly, every wall acting like a slow-release radiator. Even building inspectors admitted that R value, the metric nearly all modern energy code is based on, fails to measure what matters most: the ability of a material to store heat over time. A log wall rated R10 on paper routinely outperformed walls rated R40 in practice. That's the part most people never hear. Modern construction looks efficient on a spreadsheet. Medieval construction is efficient in the real world. And when you step back and compare everything, the fuel use, the comfort, the resilience, the cost over a lifetime, the conclusion becomes painfully clear. A well-built traditional cabin might use 15 million BTUs of heat per year. A modern home can blow through 90 million. The old cabin stays livable for days without a fire. The modern home becomes dangerous in hours. The old cabin tightens and improves with age. The modern home deteriorates from the moment the last nail is driven in. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't a romantic fantasy about living in the woods. This is physics, pure, unchanging, unavoidable physics, and builders who understood it deeply because their survival depended on it. Today, only pockets of that knowledge remain in places like Alaska, Scandinavia, and rural Russia, where people still build with these time-tested methods and burn a fraction of the fuel their neighbors do. They're not clinging to the past, they're simply using what works. So the real question isn't, why were medieval cabins so warm? We know the answer now. Dense timber, airtight joinery, living insulation, masonry heating, compact spaces, thermal zoning. A complete system built within the laws of nature, not around the assumption that electricity will always be available. The question we're left with is far more important. Can we build like this again? Can we take the resilience of the past and combine it with the convenience of the present? Can we stop relying on fragile machines to do the work our buildings should have been designed to handle? The answer is yes, and in our next investigation, we'll show you the modern homes built using these forgotten principles. Homes that stay warm with almost no energy. Homes that turn brutal winters into background noise. If you want to see how that's possible, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Because before we can fix how we build, we have to remember what actually works.